We will commence with the daily routine. Presenting and reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable the Minister of Environment.
I make this motion on behalf of the Premier, Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I make this on behalf of the Premier. I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas through their role in the construction and operation of the Canadian-led Laser Radar, or LIDAR as it's known, enthusiastic members of Dalhousie's International Phoenix Science Team were there in spirit when the Phoenix mission landed near the northern polar cap of Mars yesterday after a 10-month voyage. And whereas the LIDAR is a key scientific instrument for measuring the structure of the dusty atmosphere of the planet, making it a valuable tool on a mission designed to discover more about Mars. And whereas the information gathered by this instrument will allow scientists to understand how Martian weather evolves, as well, the results can help us better understand how weather on Earth develops by contrasting and comparing the findings with similar processes here. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Dell's team on NASA's successful landing yesterday and wish them all the best as they continue to be part of this important 90-day exploration of the red planet. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
Well, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Children's Aid Society of Cape Breton, Victoria is carrying out positive and preventative work with families and children through programming at Clifford House, North Sydney, and whereas through a partnership with Cape Breton Island Housing Authority, families have the opportunity to access supportive services and programs that focus on the needs of families in their own community. Whereas the Department of Community Services is proud to support agency partnerships that are proactive in providing families with a nurturing experience in a supportive community setting and that promote independent family functioning. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House commend the partnership efforts of agencies in improving the lives of our families in the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Resource Recovery Fund Board sponsors the Nova Scotia Recycles Contest, and whereas Region 5 had over $40,000 in winners in 2007, and whereas Justin Stoddart of Northeast Kings Education Centre was runner-up in the Grade 7-9 magazine advertisement competition. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House congratulate Justin Stoddart on his advertisement, as well as all Nova Scotians who win when they reduce, reuse, and recycle. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Acting Minister of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Red Cross's second annual conference on disaster management took place May the 7th through the 9th in Halifax, and whereas conferences such as this are of vital importance to share best practices and forge the relationships that will serve citizens well in times of crisis, and whereas this government has made public safety a priority and has been proactive in investing in emergency preparedness through the Emergency Management Office, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House thank and congratulate participants in the Red Cross's second annual conference on disaster management for working together for the betterment of public safety for all Atlantic Canadians. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Resource Recovery Fund Board sponsors the Nova Scotia Recycles Contest, and whereas Region 5 had over $40,000 in winners in 2007, and whereas Ms. Terry Bowlby's class of Port Williams Elementary School was winner of the Grade Primary 1 Colouring Contest, therefore be resolved that all members of this House congratulate Ms. Bowlby's class on their achievement, as all Nova Scotians win when they reduce, reuse and recycle. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. Notices of motion. Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on April 14th, a giant in instrumental music education in the province of Nova Scotia, Ron McKay, passed away. And whereas Ron McKay influenced thousands of musicians, young and old, over many years of passionate devotion to concert bands, orchestras, choirs, and individual instruction, first in the Truro school system and then in the Halifax area. And whereas several of the bands which Ron conducted were recognized to be the best school concert bands in Canada, and many members of Nova Scotia's and Canada's current music scene are former students of Ron McKay. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly recognize the immense contribution Ron McKay made as a music educator, and be it further resolved that this House extend our deepest sympathy to the McKay family and to the legion of musicians who have lost their friend, teacher, and mentor. Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Annavale chapter of the Order of the Eastern Star is celebrating 60 years of community involvement, whereas the Order of Eastern Star is the largest worldwide fraternal organization in which both men and women can participate and hold office, with the Middleton OES being the 31st chapter formed in the province, and whereas this organization has been supporting worthwhile causes in the community since its inception, with this year's project aimed at raising $40,000 in support of Special Olympics, therefore, be it resolved the House of Assembly join me in congratulating all members of the Annavale chapter of the Order of Eastern Star on marking 60 years and wishing them many more years as a respected community organization. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, here I give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas New Glasgow native Corporal Dave Fox has been stationed with the RCMP all over the country and has recently come home to protect Nova Scotia's children. Whereas Corporal Fox was named the head of the RCMP's Internet Child Exploitation Unit here in Nova Scotia in 2006. Whereas Corporal Fox maintains while there is still too much online activity in Nova Scotia, police forces are making strides with every change from the ICE unit, resulting in a conviction and more victims coming forward. And Corporal Fox insists that while the work can be emotionally straining, the reward is very satisfying, knowing that current and future victims can be better protected. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House send their praise and gratitude to New Glasgow native and RCMP Corporal Dave Fox for the very important work he does to protect all of Nova Scotia's children. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the Member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in an emergency situation, often first responders are volunteers. And whereas the municipality of East Hants has seen fit to acknowledge the special efforts of first responders, and whereas on May 9, 2008, Ms. Candy White was recognized as the municipality of East Hants Firefighter Search and Rescue Volunteer of the Year. Therefore, be it resolved, this House of Assembly congratulate Candy White on being named the municipality of East Hants Firefighter Search and Rescue Volunteer of the Year. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas ADSM for Women and Children is a non-profit community-based organization which opened its doors in 1983 in Halifax. And whereas currently ADSM operates 3 facilities that are dedicated to providing safe shelter and housing, services and support to female youth, women and children who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. And whereas on August 17, 2008, ADSM will host ADSM Fun for Families to mark its 25th anniversary with food, games, races, face painting and more. Therefore be it resolved that members of this House recognize the very valuable contribution ADSM for Women and Children has made to families over the past 25 years and wish them every success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Hants West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jean Lance, in a special presentation in mid-April, received a Dominion Life membership pin and certificate from the Women's Missionary Society of the Hantsport Baptist Church. And whereas Jean was an active member in Ontario of the Women's Missionary Society and joined the Hantsport Baptist Church chapter in the fall of 2006. And whereas the presentation to Jean by Mary Lee Caldwell, president of the local society, played an integral part of the Women's Missionary Society mission Sunday morning service. As the pin presented to Jean had been returned to the Hantsport chapter by the family of the late Chris McKinnon, who passed away late last October. Therefore be it resolved that all MLAs in this historic House of Assembly recognize the genuine, caring, and wonderful work undertaken by individuals such as Mary Lee Caldwell, Jean Lance, and members of the Women's Missionary Society of the Hantsport Baptist Church. Mr. Speaker, I request a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable, the member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cody Alderson of Pictou County and a student at Northumberland Regional High School in Alma was selected from almost 4,000 Canadian high school students to receive a $60,000 TD Canada Trust 2008 Community Leadership Scholarship. And whereas Cody submitted a unique application telling of the project he undertook at his high school called the International Buddy Program, pairing local students with international students. And whereas Cody has twice been co-president of the Students' Council and has been actively involved with his church and is a power skating coach. Therefore, it be resolved this House of Assembly congratulate Cody Alderson on winning the prestigious TD Canada Trust 2008 Community Leadership Scholarship and wish Cody every success in his plans to become a teacher. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas throughout Canada, May is recognized as hepatitis, I'll finally get it out here, Awareness Month. Whereas it established that over 250,000 Canadians are infected by hepatitis C. However, many are not aware that they have the infection. Whereas Hepatitis Awareness Month is a great opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to making the public aware of hepatitis C and the prevention measures that should be taken to protect against the infection. Therefore, be resolved that members of the House of Assembly recognize the month of May as Hepatitis Awareness Month and work towards making the public aware of this infectious disease. And I'd ask for waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The chatter is getting quite high, and it's getting hard to hear the speakers. The Honourable, the member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Shane McCrae of Georges River was one of 22,375 runners to start the 112th Boston Marathon in April, and whereas the Boston Marathon was first run April 19, 1897, and has become the world's oldest annually contested marathon, And whereas Shane was a rookie participant this year and finished in a time of 3 hours, 15 minutes and 3 seconds, and was accompanied by 8 other enthusiastic runners from Cape Breton who also participated in the marathon, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Shane McCrae of Georges River for his initial participation in the Boston Marathon and wish him every future success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the
Order,
adoption.
please. It's very hard to hear the Speaker. The Honourable the member for Halifax Atlantic has the floor.
And I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Janet Kidston lives in a house continuously occupied by her family since construction by her many greats-grandfather Alexander Kidston in 1826, and will open it to the travelling public June 1st as the Kidston Heritage House Bed and Breakfast. And whereas the lands of the Kidston family's Rocking Stone Farm, which prospered as a mixed farm and dairy into the mid-20th century, once included the famous Rocking Stone, a boulder deposited by glaciation and left delicately balanced on granite base. And whereas the Rocking Stone has long been a tourist attraction drawing day visitors from around the world, including members of the royal family and Joseph Howe, who listed it as a must-see in Western Randalls and Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly commend Janet Kidston on the opening of the Kidston Heritage House Bed and Breakfast June 1st, wishing her all success as she renews the tourist tradition in Spryfield and recognises its contribution to the local economy. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas George MacDonald, the representative for Districts 1 and through 4 on the Cape Breton Victoria Regional School Board, has recently been recognized for his hard work, and whereas the Nova Scotia School Board Association has named George MacDonald the School Board Member of the Year, and whereas throughout his life George has shown his dedication to the lives of students by serving on numerous school board committees, 20 years as a guidance counsellor and coach at Reserve District High, and 16 years as a guidance counsellor and administrator at Glace Bay High School. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the House of Assembly recognize the many efforts of George MacDonald and congratulate him on being named School Board Member of the Year. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas New Glasgow-born violinist Bob Murray played violin for the 70th time at the recent New Glasgow Music Festival, whereas he doesn't remember much about the first time he competed 70 years ago, he does remember the name of the piece he played when he was just 8 years old. Whereas Mr. Murray remembers playing long, long ago in the festival and the encouraging response from the adjudicators and organizers of the event, maintaining that choosing the right adjudicator, one who can deliver constructive criticism as well as encouragement, is part of the longevity and success of the festival. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House send best wishes to the organizers, violinist Bob Murray, and all the competitors of this year's New Glasgow Music Festival, celebrating young Pictou County talent for 7 decades. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas safety awareness for our seniors is very important in our communities, and the Queen's Detachment of the RCMP took it upon themselves to present a free safety program to individuals 55 years of age and older. And whereas these free programs are made up of 6 individual components and are held over 6 weeks in local fire departments within Queens County, And whereas the topics covered are self-defense and presentations by food safety inspectors, paramedics, firefighters, and pharmacy representatives. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly recognize Shirley Adams for having participated in the 6-week RCMP Adult Academy held in Greenfield, Queens County. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Tri-County Regional School Board have said that high oil and fuel costs are causing many problems, contributing to a deficit of as much as $230,000. And whereas aside from the nearly 30 schools the board operates, it has 80 school buses traveling just under 15,000 kilometers per day. Whereas the high impact of high fuel and oil costs are concerns that the school board will not see disappear anytime soon. Therefore, be it resolved that the Premier and his government develop a comprehensive strategy to reduce fuel costs in this province, allowing school boards to spend money where it truly counts, and that's on education of students. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The resolution is tabled. The Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia Association of Health Auxiliaries recently met in Windsor for their annual education seminar, and whereas 15 auxiliaries and a total of 80 members gathered to discuss a wide array of subject matters, such as drug dependency, the importance of a national auxiliary board, and even flower arranging. And whereas Hants Community Hospital Auxiliary member Joyce Jenks put it best in a recent local newspaper article when she said, "The local hospital auxiliary is a major part of this community." Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House, through this resolution, applaud the work undertaken by the Hants Community Hospital Auxiliary in hosting the 2008 Nova Scotia Association of Health Auxiliaries Annual Education Seminar. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this June 2008, legendary school teacher Kevin McNair will retire from the staff of Sir John A. Macdonald High School. Whereas Kevin McNair has given exemplary service to the students of our community, and whereas this dedicated professionalism of Kevin McNair is appreciated by students, parents, and fellow teachers, therefore be it resolved this House of Assembly congratulate Kevin McNair on his retirement from the teaching profession, thank him for his years of service with best wishes in his future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Canada Health Day, sponsored by the Bedeck Hospital Auxiliary, is the largest fundraiser of the year for the Auxiliary and was held on May 9th at the Victoria County Memorial Hospital. And whereas the event is a day-long event and involved everything from a table of baked goods to a tea room. And whereas proceeds from the 2008 Canada Health Day went into a savings account for the purchase of a digital chair scale, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House compliment the hard work of the Bedeck Hospital Auxiliary for their drive and dedication in raising funds for the Victoria County Memorial Hospital. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. whereas the Nova Scotia Disabled Persons Commission strives to champion the needs, concerns and issues of people with disabilities, and whereas Marcy Swery Stanley was named Cape Breton's representative with the Commission, and whereas Marcy's advocacy in disability issues has spanned more than 26 years, therefore be it resolved this House of Assembly congratulate Marcy Swery Stanley on her appointment to the Nova Scotia Disabled Persons Commission and wish Marcy all the best in her new role as she continues to fight for people with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the second annual awards gala presented by the Nova Scotia Arts and Culture Partnership Council was held in Sydney, whereas Alan Rombo of Kingston has been presented with the Established Artist Recognition Award, and whereas the prize valued at $5,000 is awarded to established artists who have made significant contribution to the artistic fabric of our province. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House congratulate Alan Rombo of Kingston and wish him continued success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas it's up to everyone to do their share in taking care of the environment, and whereas more businesses than ever are doing their part, and whereas Apple Auto Glass is the first auto painter on the South Shore to go green, which means it's now using all water-based paints instead of the oil-based paint. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House recognize Apple Auto Glass from Bridgewater on its role in making our environment a #1 priority. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia author Charles Crosby recently launched his second novel, Backspin, at the Keshen Goodwin Library, and whereas this novel chronicles the rise and fall of a hapless and cheerless tennis professional, and whereas Backspin was published in British Columbia since it could not be marketed as a, quote, Atlantic Canadian book, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate local author Charles Crosby on the publication of his latest novel, Backspin, an endeavour to strengthen the Atlantic Canada publishing industry so it's able to provide outlets for a wide variety of Atlantic Canadian fiction. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Future Inns in Halifax, located at 30 Fairfax Drive in Clayton Park, celebrated its grand opening on April 10, 2003, and whereas since its opening, Future Inn has become a landmark in our community, with many local residents enjoying the Redwood Grill. And whereas the inn itself prides itself on excellent value and unrivaled guest service and has become a favourite stay for visitors to our city, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House congratulate the staff and management on the 5th anniversary of their opening in Clayton Park and wish them every success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Labour and Workforce Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas since 1834 the Baptist community in the Annapolis Valley has been vested in higher learning, and whereas the mission of Acadia Divinity College, my alma mater, is to prepare men and women for leadership in various Christian ministries, both locally and globally, and whereas the installation service for Dr. Harry G. Gardner took place on May 10, 2008, making him the president of the Acadia Divinity College, therefore be resolved that all members of this House congratulate Dr. Harry G. Gardner as he serves as leader of this fine Christian institution in the Annapolis Valley. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the Minister of Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 6th Annual Blue Nose Marathon attracted more than 8,000 runners from many parts of Canada. Whereas training for endurance running at all levels requires strength and dedication that only those committed to the sport can muster. And whereas Robin Erickson completed the Blue Nose Half Marathon, finishing first in a time of 1 hour, 24 minutes and 56 seconds. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Robin Erickson on her win and successful completion of the world-class endurance run, which tests stamina to the limit. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas modern technology is providing options for the hearing impaired that would have been considered science fiction just a few short years ago. And whereas Dr. Manahar Bance at the IWK leads a world-class team that provides the opportunity for deaf people to hear with the surgical insertion of cochlear implants. And whereas the procedure helps either people who lost their hearing over time or even those born completely deaf, like my granddaughter Amelia. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge the tremendous work of Dr. Bance and his dedicated team, and this extraordinary opportunity for the deaf to hear or hear again with the assistance of cochlear implants. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll be presenting this on behalf of the member for Cape Breton West. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sydney River Parish Priest Father Norman McPhee will celebrate 50 years as an ordained priest this Sunday, June 1st, and whereas Father McPhee, who will turn 73 later this summer, began his work with the Catholic Diocese in North Sydney in 1958 before going to Honduras for 6 years, where he did so many great things with the church that included the establishment of the Fatima Home for Homeless Youth. And whereas Father McPhee has been with Lady of Fatima Church in Sydney River for the past 14 years, and to this day supports a scholarship at Cape Breton University in memory of his parents. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly applaud the community spirit and work in the Catholic Diocese of Father Norman McPhee and wish him continued success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Musquodoboit Valley Co-op and the Musquodoboit Valley Tourism Association played a pivotal role in local students during recent Earth Day ceremonies. And whereas students from the beautiful Musquodoboit Valley Education Centre and Upper Musquodoboit Consolidated Elementary School participated in a decorated brown grocery bag program where bags were distributed to co-op customers. And whereas co-op manager Michelle Smith said some customers are already using blue cloth bags, and it was so nice to see others being encouraged by students to use the brown bags as part of Earth Day, all part of the grocery bag program initiated by the Musquodoboit Valley Tourism Association. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House applaud the important environmental initiatives of students, local tourism and business owners in the Musquodoboit Valley are putting forth through projects such as the grocery bag program. And Speaker, I request waiver of notice. And
there has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Wayne Harvey was a tireless supporter of the disabled community and charter member of the Brain Injury Association of Nova Scotia, established in 1988. And whereas he intervened and negotiated for many, speaking up for them when they could not. And whereas he visited residents in rehabilitation and nursing homes and assisted some to move on to other supported living situations. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge this tireless and true advocate for the disabled community and recognize sometimes the most humble people leave the biggest legacy. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 22-year-old Jill Fraser of Beaverbank is graduating from Mount Allison University with more than just her degree, Ms. Fraser is one of only 4 to graduate with the university's Golden A Award. And whereas the recipients are presented to those who made outstanding contributions to their university community, and whereas in addition to her studies, her extracurricular activities include participation in the Students' Administrative Council, in the university's Habitat for Humanity chapter, helping a student from Japan improve her language skills, as well as improving the Best Buddies involvement with the Best Buddies program. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House salute this young Nova Scotian from Beaverbank on her graduation and prestigious award and wish her all the best in her obvious, promising future, which includes studies at the master's level at Dalhousie University in speech and language pathology. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Government Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 167, resume debate?
Bill 167. The Honourable the Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you advise me how much time I have left?
About 40 minutes.
Great, thank you.
45.
Thank you. When I wrapped up debate on Friday, I was talking about the problems and some of the issues with training for tradespeople in the province of Nova Scotia. And hopefully I don't repeat myself again on this. But there is some very serious concerns, and even over this weekend I talked to some individuals business owners and some other individuals that have very serious concerns about the direction the community college is going in the trades training. Now when you look at some of the technology type programs they're teaching, they're excellent, and I've received absolutely no complaints about that part of the training. Unfortunately, when it comes to the trades training, there's a really correlation between the technical part of the trades training and the practical part of it. And that's very unusual. In most professions today, if you're in computer technology, there's some practical work, but it really is, in the theory, almost all go together. But in the trades training, you have to become proficient with your hands and your mind and your coordination with the work you do. So it's quite different than some of the other occupations and careers that people pick today to move forward. So it's really concerning to see we have an upcoming shortage of tradespeople in this province, and I think part of the problem with that is the fact that our training has been watered down so badly that now when you do get someone from school, as I mentioned on Friday, that you should be able to take into your business and immediately start being able to produce at some level. Now, some level may be 10%, 20%, or 30%, as much as a qualified tradesperson can do. But in reality, some of the students that come out don't have the basic skills that they need even to make a contribution immediately. And these isn't because the students aren't capable, it isn't because they haven't done well in school, and it isn't because they don't want to do it or don't want to work. It's the fact that when they're in the school, the program is watered down so badly it doesn't give them the basic skills they need in order to move from the transition from the school into the workplace. I think this is something that has to be changed in this province. It talks right about what this bill is somewhat about. And we have to reinstitute proper training in the schools. I remember when I first went into the trade that I went through when I was coming through school, I worked with a gentleman from Yugoslavia at the time, one of the best tradespeople I've ever met, and to this day I still say that, and did excellent work. And they were lathe operators at the time, and a lathe operator was an 8-year apprenticeship program. You would come right out of high school, work with a journeyman lathe operator at that time, is the way it was structured then, and they would, for the first couple of years, they cleaned the machines, they observed what the operator was doing and learned how to do all the different aspects of that job so they could do the work with very, very high quality. And at the end of it, the proof was in the pudding, as they say. You turned out extremely well-trained, excellent tradespeople that could immediately go into the workforce and produce. Now, today's a society with the cost of everything. That type of an apprenticeship program is pretty impractical because you have young people that come out and they really have to go into the workforce and make enough remuneration for the job they do so they can do the things in life that we get used to in this province and in this country. And that's very, very important to be able to do that. But at the same time, it's sort of a difficult for a young person to come out and make enough money they can do the things they want to do if the school in turn hasn't given the basic training. And I feel the basic training is suffering. And now in the community colleges, it's very expensive to get this training as well. And you know, a lot of students have to take part-time jobs, which is fine, have to take student loans out. They have to do all kinds of different things in order to be able to finance the work that they do and the schooling they're going to take for a year, 2 years, whatever the course is. So paying for the course is a difficulty for them. And it doesn't mean that the students will be trained any better. It just means that the government has less cost. And in reality, it would be better if the program costs were reduced, allowing more young people to come into the trades. But the trades have to be improved. They really have to be improved. They have to take a longer period of time to train them. I feel that the trades training should be conducted longer hours each day and for a longer period of time each year. Because when you're training a tradesperson, you have to make sure that they understand the basics of what the program is. I can remember I was on the machine shop advisory board at the Halifax Vocational School, and it was also on the Dartmouth Akerley Campus Advisory Board when I ran my business to talk about this. And I remember one time talking to the instructor, and he said, we're running the machine shop program here, trying to train apprentices, get them ready for the workplace. And he said, you know, my total budget for materials last year was $3,000. Now that's for a 2-year program, and I believe they had about 15 students per class. Well, I spent probably $20,000 that week in material in one job that I purchased, and I have 6 people working in my shop. Now, we ran computerized machinery, so we produced a lot more material a lot quicker than students would. But his whole point was they didn't have the raw materials to work with, number one, and how can you learn what the reaction materials are when you're machining them if you don't have the actual materials to work on? You don't know what different coolants, what different cutting tools, how the heat distortion affects the material. So many things you have to learn, but you have to physically experience that. And even at that point, it wasn't happening. We could see the results of the students we were getting out of the school. Not because the instructors weren't excellent instructors, which they were. They were very capable people that had worked years and years and years in the industry before they had gone into the teaching profession, and people that I would have hired immediately in my shop if they would have become available. Unfortunately, the problem was that the program was not by themselves, but by the curriculum was watered so badly that it didn't help. I've had lots of complaints about the short programs they put on, such as drywall. I can't remember some of the other ones that the people have discussed with me, but some of the students come out just simply didn't have enough time in the program to become proficient enough so they could go to work and make a living for themselves, make money for the business they're in, because if a business doesn't make money, they don't survive, and ensure that they're going to have a job and a career down the road. Now, soon it's going to be to the point with all the schools taking all the home ec classes out of the schools. They took all the woodworking shops out. They took all the metalworking shops out, directed everybody to university. But unfortunately, if you don't learn today how to maintain or how to build things, that you're never, ever going to move the economy forward. You have to have a combination of both. You have to have a combination of the university graduates coming forward, improving the science and the technology in our province and in our country. We also have to have the people that after this development is done can produce the goods, can build the buildings, and maintain and produce the equipment that is so important to all of us as we move forward every day. Unfortunately, this is very, very difficult. And if we don't soon put the home ec classes, some metalworking shops and woodworking shops back in the school, you're going to find that a lot of people we're not going to have. A lot of people aren't going into the trades, and we're not going to have the people who are capable of coming and doing some carpentry work in your home or building a new home or being able to build a new part for some kind of machine you have to make sure that machine goes. And if you don't have that kind of capability, you're not going to have any heavy industry moving here if they can't get their equipment repaired and rebuilt. You're not going to be able to, what if your sink plugs up and you can't find a plumber to get it unplugged? You could be in a real problem. Or if your water lines break and you have no water in your home. And I can tell you, during the hurricane, we had no water in our home, and probably a lot of people here that live in this area witnessed that as well. And if you have no water in your home, you've got a real big problem on your hands. And so those are things that can happen. And, you know, everyone I've talked to that has taken home ec at school, taken woodworking at school, in the high school setting, junior high school setting, or metalworking, always gains a tremendous amount from that. And sometimes people make a decision on their career past that if it's something they really and truly enjoy and they're really good at. And that opportunity has been taken away. So I think that our education system has to change and has to improve at all levels to ensure that we have students coming out that can actually do the work and make our economy grow. And for many years, you know, there was told that, oh no, it'll be fine, everybody will be running computers and they'll be doing everything under the sun. But unfortunately, if you turn your car on and you have no mechanic to get it to move, you can't go anywhere. If your telephone doesn't work because you don't have any technicians that know how to fix a telephone, pretty soon you're shut down. And you can't do the work that you probably did before. And it's the same as anything that you do in life. I mean, probably one of the most important people in any establishment is the people that keeps the facilities clean and keeps everything working in it. If those things don't work and the building isn't clean, number one, people don't want to come to work in a messy atmosphere. And number two, it's unsafe conditions for people to come there. And it's just not a place you want to be. So if you don't have that level, how can the CEO of the company come to work and motivate other people in the company to do work they need to do? So every individual that works for a company is very important to that company, corporation, or indeed to government. You've got to make sure that all the elements and all the keys to the elements are there to make sure that a business is successful long-term, short-term, and it encourages people to move into the fields. And also today, with a shortage of tradespeople, and I mentioned this the other day, that when the Nova Scotia home builders were in here, they indicated to our caucus now to talk about, they said a bricklayer in London, England, makes £250,000 a year. Now, £250,000 a year for a bricklayer in London. Now, if you equate that to Nova Scotia, that's over $500,000 Canadian a year. So there's very few professions that just being in that profession will make you $500,000 a year in Canada. So that gives you an idea of what can happen when the education system is changed, watered down, and you're not turning out these tradespeople that you need, that 5 or 6 years after they graduate from their trade school, that they're top in their field and can indeed improve our economy and make things happen. So as the technical people and the tradespeople become less and less available, demand is going to go up, cost is going to go up, and luckily for the ones that are in the trades at that time, they're going to make a great deal of money, and that's great for them, as it should be. But it also means that our economy is going to slow. Again, because if you don't have the people trained that can do the work, businesses aren't going to come here. They just won't, because they look for highly skilled workforce at all levels. So they need secretaries that are well-trained, they need tradespeople well-trained, they need engineers and all the other components that make a business successful. So if you don't work towards that goal, and the province, as far as I can see in the education system, from high school, I talked about that the other day, the people graduating grade 12 can't read or write, it's not acceptable, period, for whatever reason. And then if you go to trade training through the community colleges, if you don't train people, take people out there that are the best in the country, not so-so when they're finished. And again, I stress, nothing to do with them, because if you don't have the atmosphere and the ability to learn and have the tools in front of you to work with, you can't blame the young people that take this course and hoping that they're going to be in a profession that can indeed make a lifelong income from, and support themselves and their family, and help grow our economy in the province. So that, those are some serious issues that we're going to be faced with over the next several years, and it's getting worse. The first change is they watered the programs down, they watered them down more. Nobody really noticed any difference in it because the majority of the people were already working in the trade, and that there was not very little change. But unfortunately, it takes years and years and years and years for people to see the effect of this watering down of the standards. And as you water them down, it looks okay for now, because there's still people out in the world, in the manufacturing world and the employment world, that are still doing these things. And as it changes and it gets less and less and less ability to do things, we start to see the effects. We see perhaps the elevator that doesn't work every day, that did work every day, can't work anymore because they don't have technicians to get it fixed and make it work properly. And that means a high-rise building, people can't get up and down to their floors as conveniently as they did. And you can use all kinds of examples. And as you go through this process, we have to really look and question ourselves as legislators. Are we providing the right direction for Nova Scotians? Indeed. How would you feel if you had a son or a daughter that decided to take a trade of some type, say plumbing or electrical work or whatever the case may be, and when they're done paying probably $15,000 or $20,000 tuition over a 2-year program, come to find out nobody would hire them because they weren't trained well enough, even at an entry level? You'd be very, very upset with it. Now you can imagine how the young person would feel that was hoping that would be the opportunity for them to make a living long-term for them and their families. So this is really what we're faced with. Now, that's not always the case, but as our tradespeople get older, there's going to be fewer and fewer of them. I know a friend of mine's a bricklayer here in Halifax, Dartmouth, and he told me, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, the average age for a bricklayer, a certified bricklayer in the province of Nova Scotia, is over 45 years old. That was 5 or 6 years ago. So as that goes up and up, as time goes on, you're going to see more and more people retire, change to other jobs that maybe they don't want to do the hard work, because bricklaying is extremely hard work. They don't want to do the rigors of the job and take another type of position. Who's going to fill in for them? How are we going to get the big buildings built that have brickwork on them? Even to get a fireplace repaired or a chimney replaced in your home. I mean, you don't think of those things until indeed there's not someone there to do it. So that's just a few examples of the things I believe that really we have to change in this province. And it's up to us as legislators to put the direction forward to the Department of Education and the community colleges to make sure that these things change. And again, I stress, there's not a problem with the technological training for computer sciences and the other things that community colleges do. From far as I can see, it's only in the trades. Now, if anyone out there sees differently, I would like to hear from them, and I'm sure all of us in this room would like to hear from them to see if there are other programs out there that there's problems with. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take my place. Thank you.
If I recognize the minister, it'll be to close debate. I didn't recognize you yet. The Honourable the Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much for recognizing me to close debate. I certainly appreciate that, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the members opposite for their comments on this bill. I appreciate the interest in the bill. While it is a very technical bill, it's one that's important for the safety of Nova Scotians. And so I want to thank the comments and look forward to any representation at law amendments. And with that, I close debate on second reading on Bill 167.
The question is for the second reading of Bill 167. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried.
Bill 167, entitled An Act to Improve and Promote Technical Safety in the Province.
Order that this bill be sent to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
I wonder if consensus of the House we could revert to the order of business, presenting petitions.
Is it agreed? Agreed. The Honourable the Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I beg the indulgence of the House on two issues, really. One is a petition, the other is an introduction of a bill, if I may.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
On the petition, it's a petition signed by 1,457 residents of Victoria County and Inverness County who travel the Cabot Trail almost every day, and they're talking about the deplorable conditions of the highway. And I've assigned my name to this petition. I'd like to present the petition to the House.
The petition is tabled. The Honourable the Member for Cape Breton South on a bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill and act to amend Chapter 222 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Industrial Development Act.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 222 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Industrial Development Act.
Bill 183, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 222 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Industrial Development Act.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we could go back to public bills for second reading.
Public bills for second reading.
Call bill number, thank you, and would you please call bill number 133, the Land Surveyors Act.
Bill 133, the Land Surveyors Act. The Honourable the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's certainly my pleasure today to stand and support a bill number 133, an act to amend the Land Surveyors Act. The amendments included in this legislation are straightforward. They include changes to the Land Surveyors Act that were brought to the attention of the Department of Natural Resources by the Association of Nova Scotia Land Surveyors, a self-governing professional association that is itself given authority under this Act. Mr. Speaker, many of us have had the opportunity of interacting with a professional land surveyor when we have purchased a parcel of land or when we have been interested in having a clearer understanding of the boundaries of lands we currently own. As Minister of Natural Resources, it has also been my pleasure to work with a number of Crown land surveyors, consummate professionals who are responsible for surveying and maintaining all Crown land boundaries within the province. Mr. Speaker, members of the Association of Nova Scotia Land Surveyors took the time and the effort to carefully analyze the Land Surveyors Act, which was introduced in 1989. After that careful scrutiny, they came to me as minister responsible for the Act and suggested possible amendments that the association believes will better enable them to administer the activities of professional land surveyors in this province. The proposed changes are clear and concise. They will allow members of the association's council to be elected as representatives in areas in which they normally work, not just the areas in which they reside. Give the association the power to revoke an individual's membership if that individual misses 2 months of payment instead of the current 3 on their annual dues or any other assessment or levy. Allow the association's discipline committee the authority to bill someone found guilty of an infraction for their disciplinary action costs up to a limit of $15,000 instead of the current $2,000. and allow the Discipline Committee to charge an individual member found guilty of an infraction a penalty of up to $5,000. It also makes clear that no individual shall practice professional land surveying while any of these costs are outstanding. Mr. Speaker, the Association of Nova Scotia Land Surveyors spent a significant amount of time reviewing this Act, trying to determine how it could be improved. All the changes it has requested make demands upon the association members to be more accountable to the public they serve, to act in a manner befitting their careers as professional land surveyors. These changes will also help the association better finance the disciplinary measures needed to ensure the professional conduct that most members already exhibit. Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure to bring forward these proposed amendments on behalf of an organization so eager to act in a responsible manner. With those few words of explanation, I now move second reading of Bill 133, an act to amend Chapter 249 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Land Surveyors Act.
The Honourable, the member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have a few minutes to speak here on Bill number 133, an act to amend Chapter 249 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Land Surveyors Act. And I've looked through this bill, and I guess if there's one word to describe it, would be just a housekeeping bill, in that it's primarily it's a self-regulating body here, the land surveyors, and there's a few issues they want to have into legislation or regulations around where surveyors work, and that they would have purvey in those areas, not just where they necessarily reside. Issues about penalties if there's a member that's out of line and on a particular issue, reduces the penalty time by 1 month, and I guess thirdly, the cost of the fines that are to be associated by the Discipline Committee. But generally, certainly housekeeping parts of a bill. And I guess most of us have had experiences with surveyors. I know my most recent experience was with Acadia Surveys from Pictou, and on a small woodlot property that I was purchasing this past winter, and I would say it was nothing but professional service that was provided to me, and I was quite pleased with the surveyor that did the work for me. I guess if there's one issue around surveying that comes to my attention that's brought to me lately is the records online issue. I know in the town of Pictou we certainly have some difficulties there with all the old records from 1930 being withdrawn to a central location in Halifax, and it's difficult now for surveyors or legal people to find the information they need in a quick basis. So while that's perhaps not directly related to the bill, it's still an issue, and a lot of it's on microfilm now, but it's certainly an issue that has to be resolved. But overall, Bill 133, I think, Mr. Speaker, deserves support, and I'm looking forward to seeing it move onward to law amendments and see what the general public might have to say on it. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to rise on this bill on the second reading on a little bit different drift than my honourable colleague. And unfortunately, with the Surveyors Act, there's no real dispute mechanism, proper dispute mechanism. If a surveyor comes in and puts a line through somebody's property and someone doesn't agree with it, and another surveyor comes in and says, okay, that's okay, and that one's not all right, and then what happens is, when this whole process goes forward, it's up to the individuals to go to court at great cost after a surveyor has done something. And the dispute mechanism isn't satisfactory on the present form that it's in. And it needs to be resolved. I've had several constituents come to me with problems on one particular surveying company that has gone in and put lines in or removed lines or changed lines around on individuals. And by the time we go through the process to get this resolved, it gets so expensive for a lot of people that if they're people with modest income, that they can't resolve it. And some of these things stay unresolved for years and years and years and years. And I think with this bill, we have the opportunity to make some amendments to it that would hold the particular surveyors, and I think there's a minority of them that do this type of work, and it may not be intentional, I'm sure it isn't, but a minority of them that would come in and do this. Then we need an alternate dispute mechanism that would ensure that the surveyors take responsibility for the work they do, they support their work they do, and indeed do the proper research and investigation before they actually put a line in and say this is it and this is the way it should be. Because one would hope that when they do manage to get a line and get proper cooperation with it, or line agreement or whatever other avenue is done, the research and everything, that would be a line that would stand. And in so many places in this province, there isn't proper, no surveys done at all, and there's all kinds of problems with the land title on the properties and this sort of thing. So hopefully when a surveyor is done with it, all that's resolved, and the law firms go through it and say, okay, we have faith in this surveyor's description of the property, and we have this because we have also done the research as a law firm, and say, okay, this now makes sense, it's in place, and now you don't have to worry about this property anymore not being on the boundaries that have been laid on the ground and on paper, hopefully being one of the same for a property. And indeed, that isn't happening all the time. There's some properties that lines are drawn on and they say, yep, they're okay, and then someone else comes and draws a line through it and said, nope, now it's a dispute, and then it's left up to the individuals involved to get it rectified. And once they get it, they try to get it rectified, well then you got to deal with surveyors or different surveyors, and you got to go to court possibly and resolve this, and it gets extremely expensive. And unless it's a piece of property that has a great deal of value, sometimes the cost of doing it isn't even worth the effort. So then you get a longer problem. This goes on and on and on, and people have line disputes that they never get resolved. And that's unfortunate because indeed it gets very emotional for a lot of people when it comes to property. They shouldn't. It's just a piece of another thing that you own or think you own. But that's a fact. That's what happens because property has always been assigned, years ago, the property, you either survived if you didn't survive, if you needed a farmland or forest land to get your income from. Well, that's changed a lot today, and sometimes it's worth more for development than it is for any other kind of product. So I believe there's some flaws in the Act, the original Act, and the original regulations. These really have to be addressed, and I'm not sure if I'm going to support this bill. Thank you.
If I recognize the minister, it will be to close debate. The Honourable, the Minister of Natural Resources.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it is my pleasure to close debate on second reading of Bill number 133, the Land Surveyors Act.
The question is, for second reading of Bill 133, is the host ready for the question? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? The motion is carried.
133, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 249, the Revised Statutes 1989, the Land Surveyors Act.
Order that this bill be moved to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable, the Government Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 168, the House of Assembly Act?
Bill 168, the House of Assembly Act. The Honourable, the Minister of Immigration.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great pleasure to rise just for a few moments to speak on Bill 168. Mr. Speaker, Bill 168 is a bill to change the constituency name of Bedford to Bedford Birch Cove. Mr. Speaker, the current riding of Bedford is made up of the old, or in large part, the old town of Bedford, plus about 30% in the old city of Halifax. It is also, Mr. Speaker, the center for one of the centers, I should say, for the Halifax Regional Plan growth area. Mr. Speaker, over the period of the last few years, Bedford and also the Hemlock Ravine area in the old city of Halifax have been the center of a significant development boom. And we also have the new Bedford regional plan area, the Bedford West development as well. Mr. Speaker, the population in Bedford has tripled in the last 15 years. When I first came into municipal politics back in 1988, the population was about 7,000, and that now, here we are 20 years later, and it's over 20,000 people, Mr. Speaker. I think it's very important in this day and age, especially in those areas like Bedford and the Birch Cove area, Mr. Speaker, those areas that have high growth. There's a genuine need in these areas to maintain some community identity. And I think one of the best ways and one of the most effective ways of maintaining community identity, Mr. Speaker, is through constituency names. Back in 2007, Mr. Speaker, this issue was raised at a community meeting where the folks in the Old Halifax area of our riding felt no affinity to the name of Bedford, which I fully understand. Mr. Speaker, Bedford over the years has had relationships with Bedford, Musquodoboit Valley, I think from 78 through to 88, also with Bedford and the Fall River area. And Mr. Speaker, this is no change to that particular situation. Mr. Speaker, I think this bill tries to instill a sense of community in both areas. And in this age when with the Democracy 250, where we're trying to increase constituencies and to bring the vote out in these areas, I think this bill, Mr. Speaker, will hopefully try to reinforce that particular issue. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'll take my seat and move second reading for Bill 168. Thank you.
If I recognize the minister, it'll be to close the debate. The Honourable the Minister of Immigration.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. That was quick. Appreciate the cooperation from my friends opposite. And Mr. Speaker, I would move to close debate on Bill 168.
The question before the host is the second reading of Bill 168. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? The motion is carried.
Bill 168, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1, 1992, Supplement of the Revised Statutes 1989, the House of Assembly Act.
Order that this bill be sent to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 148, the Scrap Metal Dealers and Recyclers Act?
Bill 148. The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and indeed it's a pleasure to rise in the House today to speak to Bill number 148, the Scrap Metal Dealers and Recyclers Act. Mr. Speaker, in moving this act, I believe it responds to some of the very pressing concerns that Nova Scotians have over the impact of crime as it relates to utilities, as it relates to the potential threat as well to individuals that unknowingly are putting themselves potentially in a life-threatening situation undertaking theft. Specifically, when you look at substations and a power grid and the statistics elsewhere that would show that, we've had too many examples recently, Mr. Speaker, where for us, the actions of certain people are having a negative impact in their community, on the integrity of the utility grid that we have, and also in the sense of community when you see things such as metal grave markers being stolen for recycling, when you see people desecrating community cenotaphs and or monuments. This is not an acceptable activity, but also to look at what are the next steps. And when everyone looks at legislation, we'd always want to make sure, can we get something that's going to fix the problem entirely? And while I will not suggest that this is the all and end all, it is an important next step forward to allow us a process in which the chain of evidence can be followed, Mr. Speaker, that indeed there is a process in place where our law enforcement officials can go to look and work with industry so that industry that has no intention of being involved with any illegal activity are also protected by knowing that officials will follow up in the areas necessary. And while some people have talked about a burden potentially on operators, Mr. Speaker, this goes the other way to suggest that we don't want them unnecessarily burdened through legal investigations, and having a baseline of information in place and being able to record the identity of a person who is selling scrap metal, and indeed having that information on hand. So one of the things we will do, Mr. Speaker, and I've committed, we didn't want to get into recognize or to be against those that are in commercial operations. That's not what this is for. This is about individual activity. The honourable member from Richmond indicated his concern about commercial operators that have a regular ongoing business, that's a legitimate business transaction, and are we going to unnecessarily burden them? And that's not the case. And through the law amendments process, Mr. Speaker, I will be proposing a government amendment to help address that aspect. As for regulations in this, it is not the intention of the government, nor will we, Mr. Speaker, in being successful in moving this forward. We will make sure that the regulations have been properly understood and in place, that people know exactly how this process will work in its detailed aspects before a proclamation is done. And that was brought up as a concern that we don't know what the regulations are, and we want to do more consultation with industry. Well, indeed, Mr. Speaker, that will occur. We will provide that level of consultation. I, as Minister, will assure all honourable members that the regulations process will be done with their involvement in terms of my critics, working with industry to have the best possible legislation upon the proclamation and the regulations to meet that. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the intervention of my colleagues. And again, as this bill moves forward, as I hope, I'll be happy to address any of the issues or concerns my colleagues have. And just note that I am sincere in wanting to make sure that we also protect the public, at the same time holding those that will break the law accountable. So with that, I move second reading, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to take a few moments of the House's time this afternoon to discuss Bill 148. I can tell you, as the school administrator involved in one particular recent incident that happened at Brookside Junior High School, the baseball, fastball, lob ball, pitchers, catchers, and other player positions are hugely concerned about the fact that because of the difficulty that has arisen with the light standards at that particular field, we're looking at recreational facilities in the community that I'm fortunate enough to represent that are going to be greatly curtailed this summer unless there's very prompt action. Now, we've been hearing from various people about this problem. This past weekend, I was contacted by a prominent member of the Ubley family in the community of Ubley, which was the original site of the old previous Sir John A. Macdonald High School. It's now the site of 5 Bridges Junior High. There's a cairn there that has, or had, a beautiful plaque on it, which of course designated that plaque recognizing the Ubley family for their commitment to giving the original land grant for the school that was built there many long years ago. I mean, it's a valuable historical monument that the community has restored, and the Ubley family has taken great pride in restoring. This weekend, we were made aware of the fact that there had been some damage to the cairn. So, of course, immediately family members went over to see what the problem was, and there were thieves who were attempting to remove the brass plaque on the front of the cairn. They had caused an extensive amount of damage to the cairn itself, but it wasn't the beautiful beach stones that they were after, of course. This is a unique cairn built in this community. As you come out along the Bay Road just before you arrived in the community of Upper Tantallon, there is the community of Ubley, a very well-known community named after prominent citizens of many years in the past. The damage was caused to this cairn because there were, of course, some irresponsible people in the community who were out there looking to get that brass plaque off that cairn. I think it's always really important that when we hear events like this, I know the first reaction that we heard when we heard the difficulties with the ball fields, there are those teenagers at it again. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. Teenagers do on many occasions cause problems in our community when it comes to any kind of vandalism or destruction of property. It's unfortunate that a few of them in those sorts of situations give teenagers a bad name. But from what I understand, these are not crimes that are being committed by teenagers. These are crimes that are being committed by well-organized adults who are out looking for precious metals, they're out looking for copper, they're out looking for brass. You know, some of the destruction that has resulted in our communities is absolutely unacceptable. First of all, we can look at our ball fields and what they mean to our communities. And you come from a community, of course, that has a huge tradition in sports, softball or fastball or baseball, whatever level. Well, the opportunity that you have lights in your community to play ball, it extends the playing time for the men's and women's, and of course the children's leagues that they can have the opportunity to play. Now, Cecil Wright of course, is a well-known sports activist in our community, and I will even admit publicly that Cecil Wright is a friend of mine on certain occasions, although his choice of certain Boston sports teams are completely unacceptable. But Cecil Wright, of course, is a well-known baseball coach and, of course, a sports commentator and an activist. And he, of course, is well recognized because of the commitment that he gives to our communities. However, as the current coach of the Halifax Pelham Canadians, Mr. Wright is going to face lots of problems this summer because of the damage that was done by, again, these thieves, these vandals, who made this lighting system inactive because of the fact that they, of course, were after the copper. Now, Cecil's been very patient in his request of the cities, particularly when you look at the quality of the fields that we have to put up with in the HRM. You want to go to see a great ball field, you go to see Kentville's ball fields. You want to see good ball fields, baseball fields in particular, you go up to Churro, go to the Bible Hill area, you can see great ball fields. The HRM ball fields are at times, let's call it like it is, they are really absolutely in embarrassing shape. Now, we were planning this summer to host the Midget National Baseball Championships in this province. In the meantime, the HRM is scrambling to make sure that these ball fields have some of the amenities, not just between the white lines, but some of the amenities that are necessary for baseball to be properly played by young people of all ages, in this case, the National Midget Championship. We are curtailing our athletic abilities of young people and adults in our community because of the damage that's been caused to the lighting systems with these thieves who've gone out of their way to vandalize our community. Mr. Speaker, what really strikes home, however, and the minister's drawn attention to it, as the proud son of a veteran of the Second World War, I mean, it is absolutely unacceptable, inexcusable, and in fact, in many ways, deplorable, if that's the politest word I could use in this situation. The damage that these vandals have done in their search for a medal to veterans, to cemeteries, to cenotaphs. There is no excuse for that sort of terrible behavior, if that's the appropriate word to use. And so we looked at how we can correct this piece of terrible operation. When we look at how these graves, these cenotaphs, these cairns, these lighting systems, we look at the result of them and say something has to be done. And to the minister's credit, he has responded. As the Justice Minister, he's introduced this bill, and therefore we look forward to continuing to support this particular initiative of this government. I caution, and I add this caution, let's look very clearly at the fact that the huge number of metal recyclers in this province are fair and honest, open business people who very clearly are concerned about who is arriving with a load of scrap metal. There are, however, unfortunately, those who have been accepting this metal from vandals and thieves, and they are the ones that we must deal with. So I really make sure that the government opposite looks very clearly at the operators and listens to the scrap metal dealers so that they will make sure when regulations are in place that these will be the type of regulations that will be based on common sense, that will be based upon the fact that these people who are operating scrap metal dealerships are busy people. They're trying to make a living. The last thing that we can do is encumber them with more paperwork. So I want to make sure, and I've heard the Minister of Economic Development stand in his place and said that that government over there, their trademark is they consult. Well, in certain pieces of legislation that have appeared in front of law amendments over the length of that government, they have not done a good job of consultation. We hear that from various stakeholders that come forward and say, we don't know where this is coming from. We were never asked. This is going to be, in my opinion, a test case for consultation. This is an important piece of legislation. It deals with an issue that affects communities, veterans, athletes, historic monuments, and if we're going to do it correctly, we have to make sure that the people who are involved legitimately, those people who are out there running a fair business in the scrap metal dealership business, they have to be listened to. They want to do the right thing. They want to make sure that they will be cooperative with government, and the regulations must reflect the fact that there is a proper input from the experts on the ground who deal with this issue each and every day as they make their living in this province. So, Mr. Speaker, with those comments and that word of caution about the regulations, I look forward to supporting this bill as it moves through our House. It's a response to an unfortunate situation that we have to deal with in our community, and it will be dealt with in a proper manner with the support of all legislators in all three parties in our province. With those comments, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my place. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a few comments on this bill. It's a bill. I know the intent of the minister and the government when they bring this forward is to eliminate some of the very serious vandalism problems that are going on in our province, which are not acceptable, and theft of materials that have caused a great deal of grief for businesses and families and indeed organizations throughout the province. The only comment I have on this and with the bill is just to ensure that the minister, when they're providing the regulations, that they make the paperwork as straightforward as possible while achieving the information they want from the scrap metal dealers, that to eliminate the paperwork burden on the scrap dealers, because that is a serious problem, and if it becomes too onerous, of course they won't do it. And I think that's part of the process, because you have to make sure you've got the paperwork straightforward, really straightforward, and if that's the case, I think this will work very well. And if it just takes them a couple of minutes to do the work that needs to be done, there probably will be very few objections, but if it takes a long time to process each person that brings scrap metal in, you're going to have a big problem on your hands. And indeed, this bill will be back here again for amendments after it's passed, if it's not handled properly. So I'm sure the government will do that, but I just want to be on the record with that, and hopefully the minister can comment on that when he wraps up the debate. Thank you.
If I recognize the minister, it will be to close debate. The Honourable, the Minister of Justice.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my honourable colleagues for their comments and interventions on this bill today, Bill 148. Mr. Speaker, I think it's, as I've indicated, an important next step and a step forward, and I look forward to it proceeding through the House, and with that, I'm very pleased to close debate. Bill number 148, the Scrap Metal Dealers and Recyclers Act.
The question is for second reading of Bill 148. Is the host ready for the question? All in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried.
Bill 148, entitled an act to regulate transactions by scrap metal dealers and recyclers.
Order that this bill be sent to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 176, the Engineering Profession Act?
Bill 176, the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased as well to rise on Bill 176, the Engineering Profession Act. And this here, Mr. Speaker, is something requested by the profession itself. It is a matter of getting in sync with modern-day practices versus where the Act was first involved, and specifically adjust the amount of time that someone would be engaged in the industry. Right now it's 2 years. The industry norm is for 4 years of experience with regards to the appropriate recognition by the profession. So we were pleased to work with the Engineering Industry Association to move this forward. So again, Mr. Speaker, this is not something that requires, from my point of view, a lot of explanation, but also recognize it is important to the profession. And with that, I'm very pleased to move second reading of Bill number 176.
If I recognize the Minister, it will be to close debate. The Honourable, the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, it was very important to the profession, and I look forward to this bill continuing through the House. So with that, I'm very pleased to close debate on Bill number 176, the Engineer Professions Act.
The question is for second reading of Bill 176. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favour signify for saying yes. Aye. Against? Motion is carried.
Bill 176, entitled an act to amend Chapter 148 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Engineering Profession Act.
Order that this bill be sent to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable, the Government Deputy House Leader.
Can we recess for just a second? They're just working something.
We're going to take a short recess. We'll The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call private members' public bills for second reading?
Private members public for second reading.
Thank you. And Bill number 100, Health Services and Insurance Act.
Bill 100, the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm certainly pleased to rise this afternoon to speak to Bill 100. And essentially, what Bill 100 does is that it provides in legislation the assurance that that members of the Canadian Armed Forces, for example, who are posted outside of the province and specifically outside of the country, that when they return to Nova Scotia, they will have insured medical services in the province from the day on which they arrive back in the province. Now, I know the government has in the past done this by regulation. I think the concern that we all have is that, you know, with respect to the certainty of an entitlement such as something as important as medical service insurance, that I think most people would understand that they would want to have a larger level of comfort with the fact that they are in fact going to be entitled to medical care. The way it works now, Mr. Speaker, is that if you're out, it's not a matter of citizenship, it's a matter of residency. And currently, when you have to come back to the province and you have to establish yourself as a resident of the province for a period of 3 months, and then after that time has established, that time has what they say, the effluxion of that time, then you become entitled to be covered by the province for the medical services that you require. Now, as you probably are aware, with respect to service personnel, just as an example, let's say that you were posted to NATO headquarters and you were away for 2 or 3 years. When you came back to the province of Nova Scotia, you obviously haven't been a resident of the province for that period of time, and that is also true of your dependents. Now, for the service personnel themselves, they don't have to worry so much because they are entitled to the service that they would get through the base and through the medical inspection room, and they are covered as a part of the armed forces, armed services coverage. Now, their loved ones, their dependents, are in the position of having to establish the residency in the province, and as I pointed out, and was pointed out to me, is that this is currently covered through regulation. What this bill actually does is make sure that there is something more substantial than just a regulation that, as you know, Mr. Speaker, can be changed at any time. That this actually enshrines in legislation the right of those individuals to have medical coverage from the time they arrive back in the province. And it arose, and this may have come to your attention, it arose because there was certain deficits in the coverage through a case that occurred in Ontario. And we looked at that, we looked at the current state of play in the province and felt that it would be better if we actually stated our commitment to these families by enshrining this in law. And I know, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure you're aware of you know, these days as we see and I think have come to recognize to a much greater degree than perhaps in the past the sacrifices that are made, particularly by the families of our armed service personnel serving around the world, you know, we want to make sure that any of these kinds of irritants, these things that are of concern to them, are dealt with, so that they know when they come back to our province that we are fully aware of the challenges and the sacrifices that they have made on behalf of the people of this province, the people of the country. And if we can do these things, if we can pass a bill like Bill 100, and if it has the effect of simply smoothing those concerns out, I think that's a good thing to do. And we all, many of us were down at the Red Rally in Bridgewater, and Mr. Speaker, on Friday, and it was a tremendous outpouring of support for service personnel, and I think that's great, and I think it's even greater when we can do things concretely, when we can put forward bills like this that go just that other measure to show that we don't just talk the talk, Mr. Speaker. When we get the chance, we walk the walk. So I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to speak on Bill 100, and I'll conclude my remarks with that. Thank you very much.
The Honourable the Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Very briefly, Mr. Speaker, Bill 100, the Health Services Insurance Act, as brought forward today by the Leader of the Opposition. Our party supports this bill, Mr. Speaker, and we certainly support the comments of the Leader of the Opposition today in regards to this bill. And we'd like to see the bill move on as quickly as possible to law amendments, and therefore I will take my seat.
The Honourable the Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and on behalf of the Minister of Health, I want to indicate our support for this legislation, and indeed it's appropriate that one legislative sitting day after we had the opportunity to hear General Hillier speak to us at breakfast, that we would be considering a bill of this nature. And I know that the Leader of the Opposition and the Liberal House Leader are both members of this House who have a military tradition in their background, and one which is natural for them to express interest. Both Old Navy personnel, Mr. Speaker, and so it's appropriate that we take this step to enshrine in law a practice which we are currently carrying out in this province. And it's good at times to look at when things go awry in other jurisdictions, that you can ensure that you don't have to duplicate that situation here. So we certainly support the legislation, Mr. Speaker, and anxious to see it move through the House.
I recognize the member. It'll be to close debate. The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to hear the comments of both my colleagues, and I would move the closing of debate.
The question is for second reading of Bill 100. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried.
Bill 100, entitled An Act to amend Chapter 197 of the Revised Statutes 1989, Health Services and Insurance Act.
Order that this bill be forwarded to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 29, the House of Assembly Act?
Bill number 29. The Honourable the Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Stand and move this bill on behalf of my colleague from Halifax Citadel. And the purpose of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is to change the name from Halifax Citadel to Halifax Citadel Sable Island, which is encompassed in that riding geographically as we stand here today, Mr. Speaker. And it's just another bill that recognizes the heritage of that great island, and Mr. Speaker, that it would denote that it would take in that riding, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to move second reading of Bill 29.
The Honourable the Member for Cape Breton South.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the bill by the member for Halifax Citadel, renaming the constituency to include Sable Island. I'm just wondering if that will mean the real estate prices are now going to go up on Sable Island. Anyway, our party will be supporting the bill as it moves through the House. Thank you very much.
I recognize the member, the Honourable the Minister of Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just a few words on Bill number 29, Mr. Speaker. We rise in support of the name change for the constituency, including the very unique piece of territory, Sable Island. I know in my municipal life, District 13, I believe it is in the south end, also incorporates the Sable Island area. And it's a good thing to see Sable Island being recognized through the constituency name. And Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'll take my seat and we'll support the Bill 29.
I recognize the member. It will be to close debate. The Honourable the member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the members for their long and thoughtful intervention on this bill. And with that, I move closing of final reading of second reading of Bill 29. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is for second reading of Bill number 29. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried.
Bill 29, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1, 1992 Supplement of the Revised Statutes 1989, the House Assembly Act.
Order that this bill be moved to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Government Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 150, the Motor Vehicle Act?
Bill number 150. The Honourable the member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and say a few words on Bill number 150. Bill number 150, Mr. Speaker, is an amendment to the Motor Vehicle Act. This amendment is to help inform motorists traveling on our roads that fines for speeding in construction zones on our roads are doubled. Mr. Speaker, on January 1st, 2008, fines for speeding in temporary work zones were increased. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, you have to ask yourself, what's the point? What's the point of increasing fines if motorists aren't made aware of it? So, Mr. Speaker, signs will be posted up in these temporary construction zones to advise motorists of this new law. The purpose of doubling the fines certainly is to encourage drivers to slow down in areas where there is construction underway. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure if you ask motorists as far as what the speed limit allowed in construction zones varies. So with this bill, Mr. Speaker, we will be advising motorists. Signs will be posted up. Bill number 150, Mr. Speaker, is a good bill for the safety of Nova Scotians working on our highways. Quite often, Mr. Speaker, our construction workers in these temporary construction zones are in danger, and drivers are sometimes unaware of speed reductions in these zones. So even more, Mr. Speaker, is the need to bring some attention to this problem. So Bill number 150, Mr. Speaker, in closing, will help to signal motorists that in fact fines are doubled and therefore help to increase the level of safety for all who drive through a temporary work zone. And with that, I'll take my seat.
The Honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise in my place to speak to one bill, Bill 150, submitted by my colleague here. And we too agree that this is a good bill worthy of supporting. It's always a good thing when we're informing motorists or the general public about any particular bill that comes before the House and has a chance of being passed within the House. And of course, the safety concerns of not only men and women who work at temporary highway work sites, but also for the safety of the motoring public, to be aware that fines have increased or will be increased, or whatever the information that we need to portray is there. We do think that this is a good bill, and any information that we can share with the public is a good thing. So certainly we can support this bill moving forward. Thank you.
The Honourable, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal. Bill 150.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to get up and take a couple moments to speak in favour of this bill. And I want to congratulate the honourable member for the Liberal Party, the critic for transportation. I know he's had real concerns in regards to the province about not only temporary work areas, but as well crosswalks and other issues that he's brought before this House and brought to my attention. I do want to say that I think that what he's bringing forward here at this time is most appropriate, and I'm sure that residents of our province will agree that it will, again, be something that will lead to making our highways safe, both for pedestrians, but particularly for those who work in temporary work areas. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to speak in support of this, and we will be voting in favour of the bill. Thank you.
If I recognize the member, it'll be to close debate. The Honourable, the member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleagues for their favourable comments on this bill, and with that, I'll move second reading on Bill number 150.
The motion is for second reading on Bill number 150. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? The motion is carried.
Bill 150, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order that this bill be moved to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Government Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 170, the Motor Vehicle Act?
Bill 170. The Honourable the member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure if you ask motorists in Nova Scotia who has the right of way when passing lanes on our highway merge into one, you would probably find motorists split on the question. Some will say if you're on the right-hand side, or others on the left-hand side. Well, this bill, Mr. Speaker, will help to provide clarifications on our highways as to who in fact has the right of way when two lanes on a street or highway merge into one. Often we see motorists in the left lane trying to speed up and pull ahead of drivers in the right lane. And I'm sure everyone probably has had a few close calls and a few stories of their own. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this kind of reckless driving is probably one of the reasons why 2007 was one of the worst years for fatal car fatalities in Nova Scotia. In 2007, Mr. Speaker, there were 99 fatalities on our highways. While some of these may have been caused by weather-related conditions, certainly some were due to human error, and some of these accidents are avoidable, Mr. Speaker. So speeding on our highways can be deadly, and we need to ensure that drivers have clear signage in place so they know the rules of the road. Bill number 170 will help motorists in knowing who has the right of way when a two-lane section merges into one. Drivers in the passing lane must yield to the vehicles already in the right lane, so we can avoid as many accidents and collisions as possible. Mr. Speaker, in Newfoundland, signs are posted along these passing lanes to advise motorists who has the right of way before passing lanes finishes. So again, Mr. Speaker, this bill, if signs can stop one accident, maybe save one life on our highway, then I say it's certainly money well spent. So in closing, Speaker, this amendment to the Motor Vehicle Act will help clarify who has the right of way on our highways when two lanes on a street or highway merge into one. And with that, I close.
Honourable the member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise and speak to this bill, Bill 170. Doing a little bit of research into merging and yielding and right-of-ways, when I looked at the government website and the motor vehicle handbook, when one is merging or as two lanes are merging into one lane, it's my understanding from the motor vehicle handbook that it's the first person to get in front is the person that actually merges. It kind of is like a rotary where it's a one-on-one situation. However, I certainly can appreciate and understand why we need to be more clear, perhaps in the form of this bill, in making motorists aware of who should have the right-of-way, especially when we're traveling on the series highways where speeds are at least 100 kilometers and sometimes in excess of 100 kilometers when we have motorists speeding. So certainly we don't have a problem in seeing this bill move forward. I would expect to see very clear, concise information for the traveling public so that they do know that people traveling in the right lane has the right of way and it's not a one-on-one situation. So I would be concerned that information perhaps would not reach all motorists in a timely fashion if they're still going by instruction and regulations in the motor vehicle handbook. So providing that good instruction, good information is available to the traveling public, I see that this could reduce a lot of accidents and kind of speeding to get to that one lane. I'd also suggest too that signaling, one using their signal lights, certainly in my traveling and as I'm merging into that one lane from a double lane, I always ensure that my signal light is on as I'm merging so that people do know behind me that I am getting ready to move whether to the right or the left in a merge. So certainly we will support this bill going forward and again with proper information to motorists, I think it will be a good bill. Thank you.